The topic this afternoon is, are we prepared for the next flood? You've heard some interesting comments this morning and got some good information. And it struck me this morning, sitting looking over the program for this afternoon, and then you got the four presenters this afternoon. If you look at it like I would, and I'm Jerry VeHaun, I'm the Emergency Services Director for Buncombe County, but you look at, if we have all of this water that we've talked about this morning, probably a lot of it, when you look at the French Broad and Swannanoa River basins, is going to start in Buncombe County, go into the city of Asheville, and come back into Buncombe County. Well, you got Cynthia here, and I'm going to introduce these people in just a moment, but that's where it starts. And if she doesn't handle it, McCray's going to end up with it, and then he's going to have to handle it. Well, while he's handling it, Stephanie's going to have to deal with it. But if we need architectural advice, then we got the architect on the end down here. So, you know, just a little crazy way of looking at this. But anyway, glad to have these people with us, and they're going to make some comments, and then we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. But the first presenter, Cynthia Barcklow, sitting right here on my left. Cynthia is a graduate of North Buncombe High School, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She's been a planner at the Buncombe County Planning Department for 20 years. She's a certified planner and a certified floodplain manager. Recently served as chair of the North Carolina Association of Floodplain Managers. So we'll start out, let Cynthia have a few comments, and then I'll introduce our second presenter. Cynthia.
Thank you, Jerry. So I'm a planner. I'm also a floodplain administrator. And as a planner, my duties are broad. I get to work with affordable housing. I work with the sustainability plan in Buncombe County. I work some with alternative sentencing programs. And then I also do traditional planning with zoning and subdivision review. My work as a floodplain administrator is much more focused and much more narrow. Primarily, I enforce the county's flood damage prevention ordinance. Part of the community's role in flood response and recovery is building resiliency. And resiliency is being able to bounce back after a disaster of any sort. As a planner, part of building resiliency is to mitigate the risk and to look at the ordinances that you have in place and to realize what regulations that you need to begin enforcing if you don't already enforce those. In 2004, after Francis and Ivan, we did just that. We looked at our ordinances. We made some changes to the flood damage prevention ordinance in the county. We no longer allow any new habitable structure in the floodway, the portion of the 100-year floodplain that has the highest velocity waters. We increased our freeboard in the county. It's the flood protection level to 2 feet above base flood elevation. So in the 100-year floodplain outside the floodway, structures can still be built with a flood development permit, but those structures have to be built, one, outside the floodway or the non-encroachment area, and also 2 feet above base flood elevation. So it's a safety factor. So you're building away from the flooding source and elevating the structure up. We also, since 2004, began requiring elevation certificates from a surveyor. It's a 4-page FEMA form, and that's how we have elevation certificates certified by a surveyor for any new structure that's built in the 100-year floodplain. We also require structures to be engineered. So a structural engineer for any new structure in the 100-year floodplain has to design that structure to be able to withstand the forces of being located in the 100-year floodplain. So that's something that's new since 2004. Subdivision plans that we receive, they have to include information about the 100-year floodplain, any subdivision plan, whether it's exempt, special, minor, or major. There's a statement that says either this property is within the 100-year floodplain per FEMA map number. The effective FEMA map has to be on that survey plat. The limits of the 100-year floodplain have to be shown on that plat. So that helps anyone who is looking to purchase a piece of property look at the plat, know that they're buying a piece of property that's in the 100-year floodplain. Environmental health reviews. We review floodplain information. We have a permitting software system that links our permits in the county. So erosion control, stormwater, subdivision, zoning, building permits, any trade permit like electrical, mechanical, plumbing, any of those permits are reviewed for flood compliance. We now look at septic and well permits. So usually those are the first permits pulled for an individual property owner. If you're out in the county not on sewer service, but you go to get a septic permit to see if the property perks, a lot of times that's a condition of purchasing the property. There's a flood review, and potential property owners are told this property is in the 100-year floodplain. In fiscal year 2016, just to tell you what's happened, I reviewed 715 applications for development, which were properties within the 100-year floodplain. Out of those 715 applications, less than 2% of those were permitted for development within the 100-year floodplain. So people know not to build within the 100-year floodplain if they have a choice. So that's saying a lot. Less than 2% of that 715 were outside the 100-year floodplain. Another way to build resiliency is through training. In the county, I'm a certified floodplain manager. Within the department, there are 2 other certified floodplain managers. So I went on vacation this week, and I'm here today. There are 2 people in the office who can take those phone calls from realtors or potential property owners or property owners who want to develop and can answer those questions. Outside of the planning department, there's also a certified floodplain manager who's with Parks and Rec, and he's the Greenway planner. The emergency management planner that works for Jerry, Angie Ledford, she's also a certified floodplain manager. So the training helps everyone be able to communicate the risk to people who are interested in developing or purchasing property within the 100-year floodplain. Training, the public safety training facility. This is a new AB Tech facility, and it is not on this campus. It's off Canoe Road in the northern part of Buncombe County. In fiscal year 2016, there were over 10,000 students trained and 7,600 class hours. And this is for public safety. This is law enforcement, fire, and emergency management personnel. So I think that there's a whole lot more training going on for emergency management due to this public safety training center. And one of the last ways that I wanted to talk about for a community to build resiliency is to have active communication. Be willing to talk to people on the phone when they show up at the office, whether it's one individual or a group of individuals. Working for the county, one of my boss's policy is to be available to people because of customer service. And it's also people's livelihoods. And so we are available. We participate in education, and we enjoy receiving feedback for how we do as well. After the 2004 floods, part of my job is to enforce the ordinances. And after a flood like we had in 2004, the floodplain administrator goes out with a building official. And the building official is looking for whether that structure can be occupied safely or whether it needs to be condemned. For the floodplain administrator, what I'm looking at is to see if it is substantially damaged and what the damage is. And we keep a record of that. So we look at structural, interior, and utility damage. If we estimate more than 50% of the pre-flood value of the structure was damaged in the flood, then I have to require that the entire structure be brought up to today's standards. So there's an urgency after a flood for people to want to move back into their home. Understandable. You're not the most popular person when you say you can't move back. You can rip out these walls so the water doesn't wick anymore, but you're unable to occupy the structure. And that happened in 2004. So it's reassuring to have a county manager city cooperation, other municipalities, all on board to enforce what we're supposed to enforce, which is the National Flood Insurance Program standards. It's also reassuring to know that your boss is willing to reassign people after disasters. We had to hire more people, had to hire a housing counselor, a housing assistant, had a contract with a rehab specialist. There were a lot of grant funds that came in after 2004. They came in July 2005, almost a year after the flood hit, but we had a lot of programs. And I'll shut up for now, but if it comes back to me, I'll tell you about the programs.
Okay, and incidentally, hold your questions or be thinking about what questions you want to ask, and once we've heard from the presenters, then we'll open it up for questions. Next, we have McCray Coates, who's a professional engineer, graduated from North Carolina State University. We won't hold that against you, McCray. With a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering with a construction emphasis. He worked for the North Carolina Department of Transportation for 11 years, serving as Assistant District Engineer, County Maintenance Engineer, and District Engineer. He's been the Stormwater Division Manager for the City of Asheville for over 8 years. Oversees Stormwater Division for the Public Works Department. His crews perform street sweeping, vacuum truck operation, and also develop flood mitigation projects for the city. His group is also responsible for the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System program for the city. And this program performs functions such as public education and outreach and illicit discharge detection. Recently had an opportunity to work with McCray on a little project down on Sweeten Creek, which we both feel like is going to pay dividends the next time we have a lot of rainfall down there to mitigate the flooding that's been occurring down there over the last several years. So McCray, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jerry. How many folks were in the area in 2004? About everybody. I was telling Robert earlier, we had lunch together, was telling him kind of the experience I had. I was the district engineer overseeing Buncombe, Madison, and Yancey counties for the DOT, and I told the folks to start giving me a phone call when issues happened with the floods coming. About 12:30 at night, I started getting the phone calls, and those phone calls continued. I think we worked about 22, 29 days, somewhere in there straight, to go out and get the roadway safe and all. Overall, and I don't think Jim shared the damages, but in Western North Carolina, the 2004 flood event in the Swannanoa was about $25 million worth of damage to that basin. In Western North Carolina, it was estimated, and that's counting damages and loss of revenue, it was about $200 million. Correct, Jim? So a lot of damages that are still ongoing, but wanted to share a little bit of what the City of Asheville is doing, and then certainly we'll pass it on down the line here. But similar to Cynthia, part of the task that we do is the floodplain ordinances, and I don't want to go over all the details because our ordinance and the county's ordinance are real similar. And one thing we did when we adopted the maps back in 2010, we sit down with the municipalities and the county within Buncombe County, and we work together to say, okay, if someone's developing in the county, essentially they're going to be looking at the same requirements. So whether you're in the city of Asheville or in the county, the city has a 2-foot development standards, 2 foot above the base flood elevation, just like the county does. So a lot of similarities there, including no new development within the floodway also. So just wanted to point out, I don't know that Randy mentioned it earlier, but our original maps for Buncombe County was in 1980, was when those maps were originated. So considerable amount of time after the 1916 floods, but certainly a lot of similarities between the county and the city and the flood ordinances. The City of Asheville also has a stormwater ordinance, and with that, when you hit certain requirements, you're required to go out and do stormwater quality and stormwater quantity treatment. So what we look at there is if you have a new development come to town that hits certain thresholds, and that threshold is if you're disturbed more than an acre and over 50% of that site is impervious, then you have to go out and do the quality and quantity aspects too. So that's something that does provide some flood mitigation and some water quality treatments. About a year and a half ago, the city of Asheville joined what's called the community rating system. That's, we refer to it as the CRS program. And what that is because we have higher standards, the citizens in Asheville are able to receive insurance credits for the flood insurance. So if you have flood insurance in the special flood hazard area, you will get a 10% discount because the city of Asheville's been able to join that CRS program. So we're very excited about that. That is something definitely that is worthy of sharing to everybody who's out there. Through the process with working with the different entities, had a meeting yesterday with the Army Corps of Engineers working with the Nashville District. We have been working with that group for several years now. One of the first meetings I had coming on board with the city of Asheville was to meet with the Corps. We entered an agreement with them back in 2009 to study the Shenandoah Basin, look at that, and a lot of that was partnering with the funding source that Chris mentioned earlier, the Hurricane Recovery Act of 2005. The city was able to acquire those funds to go out and look at flood mitigation efforts. So working with the Corps, we started out looking at approximately 48 potential projects in the Shenandoah Basin with the goal to reduce flood mitigation throughout that basin. As we've got further along, those projects narrowed down to 3 projects. And with those 3, we really jumped in there. We started doing extensive evaluations of those. Those 3 projects that we were looking at, and we were looking at these, all 3 of these projects hard over the last year. Warren Wilson College was a project that was identified. The Lake Craig project, the Azalea Road area, was another project that was identified, and the Biltmore Avenue Bridge project was identified. And Robert asked the question earlier, where are we at today? Through the process, we had worked with the folks at Warren Wilson. We'd went up and met with the faculty, the student body, with the board of trustees, with the facility committee. We'd spent a lot of time developing a good partnership and a good relationship with that group. And through that process, we were able to go out and do some geotechnical exploration. Typically in the mountains, you wouldn't expect to have rock, the depth that we discovered rock on the property up there. And through that process, the Corps looks at the benefits versus the cost. So they evaluate the benefits of a project versus the cost of the project. And what we found with this project was we ended up doing the geotechnical work and found that the depth to solid rock was about 40 feet deep in that area. And that was a lot deeper than we ever anticipated to be able to tie to. So the cost of that project exceeded the benefits. And from the Corps standpoint, the Army Corps of Engineers, the project has to be a standalone project. It has to have a positive benefit cost ratio. So that project fell out of our scenarios that we were looking at. So certainly very disappointing to me and the other folks in Asheville, as well as the folks within the Shenandoah. But looking at it, we took another look at the Lake Craig project, and what we were looking at there is maximizing the benefits of the Lake Craig project. Through that same process, with the 2 projects, with Warren Wilson and Lake Craig, they had a very good benefit cost ratio. Initially looking at Lake Craig as a standalone project, we ran into those same issues, not necessarily with the depth of rock, but with the properties that would have to be acquired upstream. So any impacts that was created by this structure upstream, we would have to go out and acquire those properties. And through that process, the cost exceeded the benefits. So the 3rd project, which has been ultimately the top project throughout the scenario, is the Biltmore Avenue Bridge flood removal or floodplain fill removal. And that project is still has a positive benefit cost. We were looking at extending the reaches further upstream than what we had initially planned, and certainly looking at positive benefits in that area. The initial look, and they're going to go back and remodel that and send some more information over, but we were looking at about a half a foot of flood depth reduction in Biltmore Village through this project. So that is something very exciting. Hopefully, working with the Corps, we're going to be to a point to have a draft out by the end of this year. That's the target goal. Certainly, we have to go out and coordinate with property owners and work with them on access survey information, things like that. But we are moving forward, so we are excited about that. The project started out and continues. We have Jim mentioned earlier, we have a flood damage reduction task force group, and the unique thing about that is it's not just made up of folks in the city of Asheville. This is made up of folks throughout the Swannanoa Basin, and they've been very instrumental and with providing guidance, listening to what we have to say, and giving us great feedback. And I started out as a member of that team when I was at DOT and rolled over, never missed a meeting actually, so I rolled over to my current role as the Stormwater Division Manager and continued that. So great group of folks, and they've been very diligent, and we've been meeting for about 10 years off and on as we need to from that. So hats off to that group. Part of the process also with the Senate Bill 7 or the Hurricane Recovery Act of 2005 funds was that we were able to go out and partner with the Division of Water Resources and purchase properties along the Swannanoa that were repetitive loss properties. And to be a repetitive loss property, it's a property that's had more than one loss over a certain period of time, over 10 years. Chris is holding his hands up in the back. He's the person we contact and work with closely on that. So we were able to acquire those properties, and if y'all remember the Tasty Diner up on Swannanoa River Road, there was some storage facilities up there. The John Deere warehouse was up there. So we were able to acquire those properties that were basically from the Walmart bridge up almost to the gas station is the property that we focused on. So that was a great partnership, and we appreciate that, Chris, and everybody else that was involved. Some other things that Jerry mentioned that my group oversees is the day-to-day operations of the Stormwater Group. And heard it mentioned earlier today about the phone calls and the conversations that council was having in 1916 is real similar to the conversations that are ongoing today. Our group deals with localized flooding on a daily basis. We deal with failing infrastructure on a daily basis. We deal with a lot of different things and have the opportunity to go out and interact with the citizens of Asheville. Some of the things that we do, we have a street sweeping program now. We have 2 vacuum trucks that are able to go out and clean these clogged drains. So if a drain's clogged, we're able to come out, bring our truck, and clean that out, where historically, to fix that problem, you'd have to dig the road up and put a new pipe in. So this is a great tool that we have. Kind of a snapshot of that. Annually, we end up pulling out about 1,100 tons of material through our street sweeping and vacuum truck operation. So sit back and think, a tandem dump truck will hold between probably 12 and 15 tons of material. So roughly 100 tandem dump truck loads of material that we pull out of these drains and off the streets that would be entering the streams, the riverways, and all. So that's a very beneficial program for the city of Asheville. Trying to look through the other notes here. Last year, the city was able to put on an additional crew, and that crew's focus is to go out and pull ditches and to open up the roadsides, get the water flowing where it was originally designed to. And we maintain about 410 miles of streets within the Public Works Department. Of that, about half, roughly, has shoulders and ditches, and the other half has curb and gutters. So a lot of miles that we maintain. We have not done a very good job over the past 10 to 15 years of doing a ditching program, so we've beefed that back up and are able to get out and continue those efforts now. So we are excited about that. And certainly any infrastructure out there that falls within the public right-of-way we maintain. So we have crews that go out and actively replace pipes. We have terracotta pipe that's in the ground and is functioning well, that is over 100 years old. And our biggest challenge that we've been facing recently is pipe that was put in the ground in the 70s and 80s that was corrugated metal pipe. Metal has a life, and we are starting to see all kinds of signs of failures with that. The bottom rusts out, then you have a sinkhole come in, and we've spent a lot of time over the last, really, since 2012, replacing a lot of those pipes. Our folks, our teams are out, I'm not going to say daily, but certainly every month we're dealing with sinkholes and things like that. So I've talked a lot, Jerry, so I probably need to turn it over to you.
Okay, you're doing fine, McCray.
Yeah.
Okay, our next presenter, someone I've known for some time and have a lot of respect for, Stephanie Monson Dahl. She's worked as an urban planner for the city of Asheville for almost a dozen years. When I first met her, I was on the Riverfront Redevelopment Commission, and along with Robert down there on the end, and anyway, got to see firsthand what Steph does. Growing up with New York State's Erie Canal in her backyard set the stage for Steph and her lifelong love of waterfront. She moved to the Asheville area in 2002 for the chance to immerse herself in the entrepreneurial and creative spirit one finds in the area's town centers, along with the natural beauty and recreational opportunities afforded by the French Broad River and surrounding forest. As I said, she's well respected in what she does. She regularly deploys her well-honed skills in small area planning and community engagement, creates strategies to support creative placemaking, and also coordinates the team that builds out the city's pieces of the community's riverfront plans. She and her team are going to be, as she says, making a big mess down in the River Arts District for the next couple of years, and ask that you pardon their progress as they help create a more livable, playable, workable riverfront. And if you want to know anything about what's going on in River Arts District, Steph is the one to go to. I'll guarantee you she knows more about that project than anybody in the city of Asheville. So Steph, I'm going to turn it over to you and hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Jerry. So it's true, we're building a whole bunch of stuff in the River Arts District. I think that's one of the reasons why I was asked to come here today. I just wanted to touch back on the theme of our panel, which is, are we ready? I'm going to echo Jim Fox from earlier a little bit, which is just that, are we going to have another devastating flood? Yes, we are. Are we better off now than we were before? Yes, we are. Can we do a lot better? Yes, we can. And that's my roundabout way of answering, are we ready? So I don't think anyone's ever ready for a catastrophic flood, and I really appreciated like Mr. Sadler earlier talking a little bit more about the social consequences and that this, just isn't all about the built environment. And so that's the first thing I want to touch on is everyone's love of water. Maybe not everyone, but I'm pretty positive that most people here have some memory, something from their childhood, probably even where they remember the creek in their backyard or they remember visiting the lake, and they cherish having that piece of water in their life, and it was special to them. And so when I hear people saying things like, what should we do? We should not build in the flood hazard area, I say, best of luck with that. I am a realist. My approach is balance. So I think people want to get close to it. So I think the two questions that are we ready really is getting at is, should we be building this stuff we're building anywhere in the river areas or the river district or the river arts district in the case of what my team is working on? Is it a good thing or not? And then if we want to be ready, like what are some of the things that we're doing where we're getting it right? And where are some places that we can get on some improvement? So both of those, you can kind of break it down into two things, which is just like preparing and protection, and then recovery or response. I'm just going to focus on recovery, but I'm going to say, or I'm going to posit for you, that the approach that the city of Asheville is taking is nothing new. It's something that's happening all around the country, and that is to revitalize your waterfront. 20, 30 years ago, downtown redevelopment swept the country. People realized that there are benefits, there are environmental benefits, even to revitalizing your downtown. You can make the place denser and fit in all the people that are moving to Asheville if you revitalize downtown. You create new places for them to work and to live. Well, the same thing is going on in waterfronts, and one of the things you can do is you can hide in to those wonderful riverfront revitalization activities a bunch of, I would say, flood control or flood mitigation activities. So McCray was talking about a lot of projects that they're looking at. All of those things could be built into larger revitalization programs, and frankly, they have been. So McCray didn't talk much about the partnership that he had with the Corps and other community members out at Rec Park and Azalea, But that park is kicking, and so I'm going to posit that parks and greenways are the way of the future for us if we want to be able to balance people wanting to develop in our flood hazard areas with us wanting to preserve those natural areas for their environmental functions. And some of the things you can do in those areas is like what Boulder did. Boulder was able to reduce the monetary impact of between their two floods from over $1 billion to in the millions of dollars by, in 10 years, building out a huge greenway network that just served as a watershed, as an additional water course. And part of that is, while the city of Asheville is allowing, think of this, we're allowing people to build in the flood hazard areas, right, in those floodplains, and I think people are a little nervous about that. But we're changing the way that we're allowing people to do that, and you're going to talk a lot about how you can do that the right way if you're going to do it at all. But also, in the meantime, when what we're trying to do is say, we got more people coming here, people don't necessarily want to live without that little element of Asheville and Western North Carolina, what is awesome, which is the outdoors and nature, so let's connect them to it. So we're able to purchase property and also preserve some of those areas so that they don't get built on. So what I'm trying to say here is there's this swapping that's occurring. In the case of the project that we're doing in the River Arts District, over the last 20 years, we were able to purchase properties or have properties donated in that project area through FEMA, through some buyout programs, but also because on Riverside Drive, and it was alluded to earlier in the history program, that's where Carolina Power and Light was. That's where the old manufactured gas plant was. This is where Scana Energy then had their building. All that space that those energy companies abandoned because it was the wrong place to be trying to create and distribute energy to, those got donated to the city over the years, and now we are not developing in them. They're new open spaces. In addition, for the Wilma-Dykeman Riverway Master Plan, which is a killer plan before its time, kudos to Karen Craig-Nolan and RiverLink for getting this thing out there. But the Wilma-Dykeman Riverway Master Plan, is all about this wheel of sustainability and balance, but it's centered on building out an urban parkway that connects to the Blue Ridge Parkway in either end, in the west or the east. And the urban parkway kind of epitomizes that balance between, economic development and transportation needs and all the things our community has to have. But I'm just going to be real honest about some things. Like when we build that out, we're going to be doubling the amount of pavement sitting right down there next to the river, doubling it. But we're also demolishing 4 enormous buildings. And so some things to keep in mind when you think about what we should and shouldn't be doing, or our community and how it changes over time, is one that it does change like incredibly over time. So I was thinking about how people are saying, you shouldn't build the River Arts District. There's plenty of buildings down there already. So for those of you who haven't seen the historic photos or looked at what that district looked like when it was actually industrialized, we have almost no buildings left. The cotton mill was enormous. It took up the entire east side of Riverside Drive from what is now West Haywood Street to what is now Lyman Street, except for the Carolina Power and Light building or what have you. But when you take a look at some of the historic postcard sets and you look at that, you're going, wow, that was a lot of that was a lot of impervious surface that is now pervious surface. And somebody may develop there, but we're hoping that they'll develop there using certain things like gray water systems and green roofs and building up, and that you're going to talk about. So just to keep that in mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about this community connections thing. So it's about people. This has been said all day, and about the relationships. We have tons of technical data and engineers and good good people working on all this stuff. But we also have community leaders down in these areas, like the River Arts District Business Association, the River Artists District Association, other groups in the area that talk to each other on a regular basis, that many of them have been there, so they understand kind of how to prepare. And we have these amazing social networks that are out there on the internet or whatever on your smartphones that aren't tied into a power source or a phone line that's in your flood-prone house. And a couple different plugs for 2 different things that you can do on that smartphone. One, I don't know if it was mentioned earlier, but the USGS water alert system. Everybody know about that? You can, I'm not getting nods or whatever, but you can subscribe. I'm tied into that, so even when I'm on vacation, I can go, oh my gosh, the French Broad is about to crest its banks at yada, yada, yada. And so you can get all this information wherever you are, whenever you want it, at the appropriate times. There's also, the city of Asheville has a system called AVL Alerts, and you can sign up and you can, and if there's going to be some kind of emergency or power shutdown or road closures, you can find out about it. So we are vastly different when it comes to our ability to communicate with each other and prepare ahead of any kind of storm, and I wanted to put that out there as well. Last thing is some innovative ideas that we could look at. There have been 2 design charrettes here that I think were really interesting. They might not have made a huge dent, but they have the potential to hook into our community in the future in a big way. So in 2007, Design Workshop was a landscape architecture firm here. They held a program called Return to the River. This was before a lot of people were actually looking in the River Arts District, and they chose a very large redevelopment site. It's a site that's now called the Foundation behind the old Hans Rees Tannery, or it was part of the Hans Rees Tannery actually, originally. And they brought in a bunch of graduate students to look at what kind of innovative development could happen there. This was kind of before people were paying attention, frankly, or at least in our own community on that types of things. But the things that they came up with as far as building technologies, ways that people could live in those areas, emergency evacuation systems, ways that you could have basically channels for water to flow through in storm surge events, which is one of the things we should be talking about, just like we should be talking about landslides. You know, we also have a problem here with just these non-catastrophic floods where people can't get to work for at least a day. So that type of thing, and encouraging our community to tap into the assets of AB Tech and UNCA and have those kinds of design competitions. Similarly, in I think it was 14, the International Ecological Engineers Society had a design charrette in the River Arts District, and they basically did the same thing. So coming together as a community and being able to see how we could do this the right way might be an approach that we're not tapping into as much as we can.
Thank you, Steph. Our next presenter, someone I met while both of us were on the Riverfront Redevelopment Commission, is Robert Griffin, president of Griffin Architects. Robert brings 38 years of experience in designing contextual architecture for over 300 clients throughout the Southeast. A resident of Buncombe County since 1975, Robert has a clear understanding of regional history and smart growth ideals. His office is down in Biltmore Village, and he's, as he said, not actually in the floodplain, but he's close enough to realize what it is and what it can do. So some of the projects that Robert's firm's been involved in: the Manor Inn Apartments, Biltmore Village Development Plan, Millstream Neighborhood at Walnut Cove, Grove Arcade Public Market, St. Mary's Episcopal Church Parish Hall, McDonald's Biltmore Village, to name a few. And a lot of you here are certainly familiar with a lot of what I just mentioned. Robert's a member of the American Institute of Architects, the NC Green Building Council, Partners for Sacred Places, the National Trust, Preservation NC. He currently serves on the board of the Preservation Society of Asheville and Buncombe County. He's a past board member of the Asheville Area Riverfront Redevelopment Commission, RiverLink, Mission Hospital Foundation, Preservation North Carolina, and the Historic Resources Commission of Asheville and Buncombe County. Robert studied electrical engineering at Mississippi State University and art at Delta State University before receiving a Bachelor of Science in Architecture from Auburn University in 1975. As a licensed architect in the state of North Carolina, completed many hours of continuing education courses and also teaches continuing education courses for the NCAIA. So Robert, I know you have a lot of experience and a lot of expertise, and you can tell us a lot about what we can build in certain places, so we'll hear from you.
Thank you, Jerry. Just to get an idea of who I'm talking with, could I have a show of hands of who lives or owns a property that is impacted by flood that's in the audience here tonight? So there are many smart growth types of construction that can be used when you're near a floodplain, and those same types of construction are essential to the entire French Broad and Swannanoa River Basin. Anything you do, if you're in that bowl, so let's put it this way, is there anybody in here that's not in that bowl that we talked about earlier, that doesn't live in this French Broad, Swannanoa River bowl? Okay, very, very few. So you've got the same sort of responsibility as anyone else in terms of managing water on your property and not letting it get into the river. If you can help with pervious surfaces, you are helping everybody else downstream. And you don't have to wait until it gets right up to the banks of the river and right up to the floodway in order to help flooding in western North Carolina, because as you've heard earlier, it has socioeconomic impacts, whereas you might not be flooded personally, but it will damage the economics of your community. So we all should be responsible for the type of construction. And of course, if you are building in a floodplain, there are two ways that you can build in a floodplain in Buncombe County now. One is you can build your property up on columns or stilts, if you will, and let the water flow under it. Parking lots in Biltmore Village have been done that way. In the Brook Street development, the Bohemian Hotel has underground parking. So they're not what I refer to as a basketball in a full tub of water. Because if you take a basketball and push it down in a full tub of water, you're going to displace that water. So that's what happens when development in the floodplain is filled with fill dirt up to, or with a stem wall, is they are displacing that amount of water, and it is also not allowing water to flow under their project, which is a much more beneficial way to move the water quickly and keeping it from damming up in the district. So as was mentioned earlier, your habitable space will need to be 2 foot above the mean flood elevation, and we found in Biltmore Village with the projects that I helped after the flood there, that it's best practice to go ahead and get your electrical and your mechanical systems up above that mean flood elevation too, if possible. You might drive through Biltmore Village and notice a lot of the air conditioning condensers are mounted on the roofs or on the side of the building up high. So those kinds of preparations when you are expecting a flood event on your property are very important. Sandbagging is something that is always something you see in floodplain areas. It is an effective way. It needs to be managed with pumps. So if you are trying to protect a structure with sandbags, then you need to be sure that you're going to have power and a pump, because the sandbags aren't totally impermeable. So you will be managing that with pumps, and probably require a generator, because most of the time you have a flood of that size, your power goes out. So you may want to think about that. The contents of a home are not insured with flood insurance. Most flood insurance just insures the structure. So if you have a lower basement level that is in the floodplain and your main level might not be, then with the flood alert, you want to move your contents out of that flood-prone area. And even with equipment and that type of thing, there were, I don't know how many containers that floated down the Swananoa River from people who had them stored, and that makes these folks' job a lot harder to deal with. Also keep in mind, as I found out, helping my neighbors, my property happened to be above the floodplain in 2004 in Biltmore Village, but my neighbors didn't, and we spent a fair amount of time cleaning and evacuating their properties, and all of us got pretty sick. A flood is a nasty thing. Environmentally, you're talking about bacteria, you're talking about oil, you're talking about chemicals that you have no idea what they are. So just be aware of the air that you breathe in a structure that has been flooded is not very healthy. So you want to immediately ventilate it and try not to work in an environment where the air is not healthy, whether you're working on your own property or helping friends. The other thing that I see often done by mistake is people with, say, a wood frame structure that is likely to flood will often seal up their foundation vents on a crawl space and caulk up their doors. And you want to be really careful about that because you could be creating a boat. And if you do that and your structure isn't heavy enough, it will float off of your foundations. So you need to be aware of that balance between last-minute preparations and permanent effect of those preparations. The development in the floodplain in the area as citizens, anything you can do to lobby for even more strict regulations for development in the floodplain when it comes to fill and pervious versus impervious surfaces. Sometimes requiring pervious surfaces in a floodplain where the water table is already a foot below grade might legislatively pass as good practice, but when you think about the Sales Bleachery Walmart with all of their underground water storage systems from all that asphalt, and you recognize that the water table is just right under that asphalt, so those reservoirs are full. And that type of pervious surface use, in my opinion, is not particularly effective. So fill in the floodplain is probably the low-hanging fruit, and anything we can do as citizens to encourage our local governments to either offer incentives for not doing that or strengthening regulations to forbid it would be in everyone's best interest. Thank you very much.
Okay.